Welcome to the Car Guys and welcome to the Ferrari 550 Maranello, specifically James from YouTube channel JayEmm on Cars' Ferrari 550 Maranello. I'm going to take you through a full review of this car. It's the first time that I've driven one of these front-engine V12 monsters. I'm dying to get behind the wheel and find out what the fuss is all about. So the first thing to say about this car is it is beautiful. At the time, 550s were not considered a pretty Ferrari, but I think over the years this has aged particularly well. That classic long bonnet, short cabin configuration and the stance of the thing really does make this a true classic right now, and values have been quite low but now starting to rise for what is one of the best front-engine Ferraris they've ever made. This car is a 6-speed manual, which is the one to have, and it's in Rosso Corsa with creamer leather. Shh, don't tell James though, but I actually don't like 550s in red. I just think they look a little bit ungainly. It's a bit too much red. For me, if I was going for a 550, it would be dark grey with Bordeaux leather, or it would be a black car with tan, or a Tour de France car with tan. But shh, we don't want to upset him, do we? One of the things to highlight on the front of the car are these covered headlights, which came from the outgoing Testarossa 512M. Also, just look at the size of that air scoop going into the bonnet. It's fantastic, and it's actually functional. The back of this car, in particular the lights, are very 355 and also 456 GTA. I was never a big fan of the rear of this car. I thought it looked heavy, and the overhangs over that rear wheel to me looked very clumsy at the time, but as these cars have aged, I'm starting to get used to it. I actually think now the 550 shape will be one of the all-time greats. One of the real distinctive features on the bodywork of this Pininfarina designed car are these side vents here just behind the front wheels. Now they're a very historical item and they hark back to the 250 GTO and the 275. The 550 Maranello, in particular a manual gated car, which this is at the moment a real sweet spot of modern Ferraris. This was launched in July 1996 and they carried on until 2001. That svelte Pininfarina body is utterly distinctive. The design touches like the back angled front grille, the bonnet scoop, the side vents, and overall the way the car looks with its long bonnet and short stubby back. These cars are really aging nicely at the moment. This was obviously a successor to the Testarossa, specifically the 512M, the Modificato, and it's part of a long line of front-engined V12 Ferraris that extends right up to the 812 Superfast. It's a lightweight aluminium body welded to a steel frame, and the front and rear of the car were composites to save weight. But even with those weight-saving abilities, it still weighs 1,690 kilograms. It's got independent suspension, front and rear anti-roll bars, electronic shock absorbers which can be changed between normal and sport just like the 355. It's also got an early ASR traction control system to try and rein in all the power. The car features Servotronic steering, which is light at low speeds for parking and then weights up as you gain more speed. And the engine itself is a 5.5 litre 4-valve per cylinder twin overhead cam V12. Mounted at the front, and it's a variation of the 456 GT engine. And headline stats for this car: 0 to 60 4.6 seconds, 0 to 100 miles an hour 10.1 seconds. It's got 485 brake horsepower, which is 491 PS. Top speed of 199 miles an hour. Peak torque is 419 foot-pounds, which is 569 newton meters. The car itself is 4.5 metres long, 1.9 metres wide. Even though at the time this was considered a big car, by modern standards, it most definitely isn't. First time out in the 550 Maranello, James's 550 Maranello. He's behind me in the Valentino Balboni, which means I get a lovely view of that car. It's predicted to be the hottest day of the year, so I'm quite thankful that the air conditioning in this car works perfectly. Now, if you've watched James's channel, you will know that this car is quite a well-used Maranello. It's done 95,000 miles but crucially, it is actually still in good, pristine order. Now, first impressions of this car specifically is that the throttle pedal is very sticky. Initially, you think there's something wrong, but then if you push a little bit harder, it finally gives way and off you go flying down the road. But it's a sunny day. I'm in a Rosso Corsa red Ferrari. It's got creamer interior. It's the classic 90s spec. And this is a front engine V12 Ferrari, a proper continental crushing cruiser. Now, the first thing to say about this car is it is a doddle to drive. Clutch, steering, gearbox, open gated metal gearbox are all an absolute pleasure. Everything is light, everything is easy to control. It is the perfect GT environment to do seriously long journeys. You can place the car quite accurately on the road. It's very comfortable. The driving position is perfect. I've got those classic Veglia dials ahead of me. As a 355 owner, a lot of the interior of the car is very familiar to me. A lot of the switch gear is the same. The fact that it's sticky as well, the fact that all the buttons are sticky on this car, it hasn't yet been fixed in the way that my 355 has. The eccentricity of the placement of the controls. Everything is very 90s Ferrari, and that, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is a great place to be. A time when Ferrari was really at the top of its game. It was starting to emerge as a serious car maker that could produce not only flamboyant, passionate cars, but also ones that didn't break down so much. Now, I'm very grateful to James for letting me drive his pride and joy. Remember, this is his dream Ferrari. It's his first Ferrari, and I did him a bit of a deal where I said, okay, if you come down and let me drive this, then you can drive my Valentino Balboni, which, if you remember, and if you're a regular viewer of the channel, will know is a tricky son of a bitch. So I'm sat pretty upright. I've got a large imposing dashboard ahead of me, which is dominated by enormous ventilation ducts. I've got a huge slew of sticky black buttons across the center, which control everything from the fuel filler cap to the boot release, the rear screen, the fog lights. You can change between the two different suspension settings, sport and comfort, and you can turn the traction control on or off. But perhaps the most important thing is that you've got this beautiful, polished, open-gated 6-speed manual transmission. And below that, of course, the de rigueur 90s Ferrari ashtray with Pininfarina logos emblazoned on it, just like the 355. The steering wheel on this car is smaller than the 355. It doesn't have as prominent an airbag in it, so airbag technology has obviously improved when this car was made, because it looks more like the original Ferrari 355 steering wheel. Behind me, I've got an enormous luggage rack for putting custom Ferrari luggage on, and obviously I've also got a boot as well. So in terms of being able to put things away and go for a long jaunt across Europe, say, there's enough storage space in this car to make it happen. It's also relatively quiet in here. It's well damped. It's a very comfortable place to be. Ahead of me, I have quite the most enormous bonnet or hood with quite the most enormous power bulge on it. And when you look at the car from the front, that huge vent going through, sucking air into the engine. The actual view ahead of this is almost like a 1950s Testarossa. You've got a big swoop and then a tuck in and then a huge bulge over the bonnet. But it is a real classic, impressive Ferrari view. So this car was launched in 1996 at the Nürburgring, and present on that day was a certain Michael Schumacher and Eddie Irvine. This was a big thing for Ferrari. They were extremely proud of it. Oh my God, the handling on these twisty sweeping bends is incredible. It is so balanced, this car. It just feels like you can fly through the bends. I cannot believe for one moment that James is having as much fun in the Balboni as I'm having in his car. I know you've been waiting for this. Are you ready for some beans? James, are you ready for some beans? Here we go then. absolutely sings, this thing. This is Pavarotti, this is Carreras, this is Domingos. This is the full three tenors. Oh, it is just a surge of power. It is so smooth. It's incredible, really. You forget just how smooth a V12 Ferrari is, and the power just keeps on building. It's phenomenal. Listen to that. Oh, a little heel and toe action there. But this thing really shifts. And for such a big car, you think that would be scary. It takes you to the edge of the horizon in supreme comfort with very little fuss, just like the greatest GT cars do. The damping just means it's a smooth process. Let's give it a go. Let's put it into sport mode. So we're in comfort at the moment. Let's put the suspension into sport and see if it's as noticeable as it is in the 355. Right, now we're down. There we go. We're down now. Yeah, okay. So just like the 355, actually, the body roll, the body has stiffened noticeably. This is more like a sort of track mode if you were ever going to take a car like this on the track. Oh, but the punch out of corners, look at that. It just feels never ending. And in no way does it feel like we're on the ragged edge. It feels like the chassis can cope with it. It is comfortable doing mega speed, and it's comfortable in the twisties. You have to remember, going into tight corners, it is still a heavy car. It does weigh just shy of 1,700 kilograms. So you have to be a little bit respectful of that weight when you pitch that big old V12 into some tight corners. But when you get it right, and you will, because the handling is insane, it feels incredible. You can kind of understand why Jeremy Clarkson in the 90s said this was the best handling car in the world. It is absolutely sublime, this thing. And brakes wise, well, they're not bad, but they definitely could be upgraded. There is a reason why I spend an inordinate amount of time on Auto Trader looking at manual 550 Maranellos. They are so seductive, and it makes me want one even more. I have to say, I think James is onto a thing here. I think the 550s, a manual 550, really is a sweet spot in Ferrari's historic models. This is a proper car. This is a proper car, James. You have done well here, my son. A lot of people go for the 575 because it's the newer car, and then you've got to obviously have the Fiorano handling pack to fix the handling characteristics of the car because they got it wrong. But manuals on 575s are exceptionally rare. So you're going to pay a huge premium for those, which means you're going to have paddle shift. Manuals on the 550s are pretty common. This was the norm back then, and this is the one you definitely want to have. There really is nothing like a manual Ferrari. I am so disappointed that Ferrari has chosen to just pursue and stay with the paddles. Porsche learnt from its mistake and brought back the manual for driving purists, and I really think Ferrari should do the same. So in summary then, what do I think of this 550 Maranello from Ferrari? Well, actually, I'm in love with it. I think it's a fantastic car. I didn't think I would, but I really respond well to the way this car is set up. The comfort, the competence, the light steering, the balance of the chassis, the power that you get. Sometimes it's nice not to have a supercar that just shouts all the time. Sometimes it's nice to be able to kick back and go for long journeys, but know that you can just cross that continent with ease. And that is what the 550 Maranello does so well. It feels like you can drive it every day. I know that maintenance costs aren't huge. They're quite easy to service. The cabin is spacious enough to put everything you need in it, but yet tight enough to feel like you're in a proper Ferrari supercar. One thing you do appreciate when you're driving a car of this size is the visibility. Ferrari's thought hard about making the glass behind the B pillar large and wide, so when you look over your shoulder you get an almost 360-degree view around the car, which is important when the car's as big as this. The manual gearbox is of course a delight to use, but mated to that creamy, smooth but packing a mighty punch V12, it's a great combination. And what's better is you can pick up these cars for pretty reasonable prices right now. 70-80 grand is going to get you into a 550 Maranello. You could pay 100 for a really good one, but sitting where I am right now, that seems like a pretty sweet deal. Little niggles when driving this car? Well, it's got that standard drop handle handbrake, which in this case, because there's so much padding in the door card, you scrape your hand down the door card every time you try and put the handbrake on, which is not particularly pleasant. One of the things you do have to remember about driving a 550 is that the nose is very long. So when you come up to a junction, you've got to be careful not to be halfway out into the road just to be able to see around the corner. Past the angry fish and chips. Hello, angry fish and chips. I'm now going to have to scour the classifieds once again, looking for a good example of this in the right colour combination, because actually I think I am completely sold on the 550 experience. Now is the time to buy a 550 Maranello. Now is the time to get a manual one. Now is the time to drive it. Now is the time. Get off your asses and go out and get one. I've got a beautiful sunny day. I'm in a Ferrari. What a time to be alive. Thank you very much for watching this episode on the magnificent Ferrari 550 Maranello. If you like what we're doing on the channel, please subscribe, leave comments and likes. We read all the comments and we reply to many of them. Please also follow us on our website, TheCarGuys.TV, and Instagram, TheCarGuys.TV. And there will be another Car Guys episode along next week.